Thanksgiving from Winnipeg, Manitoba. I'm Jordan Fleury, host of the Canadian Cannabis Podcast. Joining me today, Annaliese Kibler from near Edmonton, Alberta, Director of Regulatory Affairs at Aurora Cannabis Incorporated, a brand I think that stands out alone on it, obviously on itself. Annaliese, thank you for joining me today of all days, very early this morning, kind of like the cannabis industry news. And with no further ado, please introduce yourself and explain a little bit of your position with Aurora Cannabis Incorporated.
For sure, and thank you so much for having me, Jordan. Like you said, my name is Annaliese. I have been working in the cannabis industry since a month before the MMPR came into effect in 2014. After finishing my master's degree in plant agriculture, specializing actually in medicinal plants. Since then, I've had a ton of different roles, working in quality, on-site harvesting, client care, and now at Aurora as the Director of Regulatory Affairs. My team and I take care of all international and domestic regulations for the team.
Impressive. So overall, industry-wise, I mean, even the shift since 2018, what drove you to the industry? This, you know what I mean, as far as the experience goes, the passion that you mentioned that way. Could you shed a little bit of light on that? Like what, and I mean, as industry people ourselves, either way, what is it that drove you to this and keeps you going? That, you know what I mean?
So I started smoking weed when I was about 13. I, thought I was using it probably for fun, but looking back and reflecting, I'm pretty sure I was using it for medical purposes. And then when I was doing my master's degree, obviously strong plants, medicinal plants. These guys in the lab were talking about how cannabis was going to be legal, and I was like, what's going on here? So when I finished my master's, I applied all over Canada. I was like, I just want a job in this industry. I don't know what I do. And ended up getting a job in BC. So I moved to BC in 2 weeks from Ontario. And I haven't moved back. So I've just been in the cannabis space for the past 8.5 years. Throughout that time, I've had some amazing people. In 2015, we started Women Grow in Vancouver, which was a women-focused organization for networking. And I ended up being the only person that worked for a licensed producer. Everybody else was coming from the legacy market, looking to how to transition that as legalization was upcoming. And through that, I met some amazing women and people where, that had such a different viewpoint on cannabis as a medicinal product. They've really been active in their communities and producing products for them, and working with consumers to find how cannabis can be used for them medicinally, and that, really just felt right.
Yeah.
It just really drove that passion even further, and really reflecting on my own consumption and my own usage, and how that, what I was consuming, why I was consuming it, being very cognizant to that, and actively consuming. And then I actually joined Aurora in 2015, employee 30 something. And I started actually running the client care department. And so we had just gotten a license to be able to register medical patients. And so I started with my team there, that department. And, we went from 0 to 20,000 patients in 2 years. And, getting to talk to patients every day on the phone, and hearing their stories and hearing their, struggles with being cannabis consumers or having a medical cannabis, and what that was affecting their lives or their jobs or their families, or even just access in general. It really just fueled that fire even more, of just wanting people to have access to the products that they need, and having opportunity to be part of that was just, it was the perfect fit.
It definitely sounds cultural. I mean, and that's a big portion of the platform as well that we run. I mean, that emphasizing the culture of the cannabis industry and everything that kind of goes wholesome with it that way. You mentioned a couple of things definitely in response there, but along your journey at this point, and something that I like to emphasize, and maybe not always emphasize enough, but what has it been like for you as far as representing women in the cannabis industry? Taking the, you know what I mean, taking the plunge, also obviously climbing the ladder, so to speak, and positioning yourself very comfortably in the Canadian, as you mentioned, potentially international market. And I mean, can you reflect a little bit on some of that, what that entails for you, pushing through, you know what I mean, to other goals and achievements that way, and just in general, that discussion alone. Women in cannabis. I mean, there are statistics that prove obviously some of the greater leadership that's available right in position now. And I don't think that number is going to change very much. And I communicate through the industry quite regularly. And I think it's very important. It's obviously something to address this way as far as where we're at in time. And with things like the Cannabis Act review, for example, coming up, certain particular areas of attention that are going to be paid through that. But at the same time, can you share a little bit about that? How is that played in your role for you as far as the industry? Anything you've seen shift that way? But definitely the representation. Similarly for myself, when I look at Indigenous cannabis, can you shed a little bit of that though, please?
Yeah, like there's definitely always pros and cons, right? Like I would say in the cannabis space being such a new space where, you know, they call me a veteran or an OG, and I've only been in the space 8 years. You know what I mean? But like in that amount of time, I am very experienced, and that is a benefit, right? Like there's not this like old established fundamental industry. There is a lot of opportunities for growth. Like I'm one of them, you know, and that has led to a lot of opportunities, especially when there's not a lot of fundamental structure or businesses established. There's always like new businesses opening up and new opportunities and new ways to approach cannabis. And I've had an opportunity with such amazing Canadian women that really trailblazed other aspects of the industry, whether it was being CEOs of licensed producers, you know, going out on their own and doing entrepreneurship. And there's a lot of innovation, and that has really been beneficial, I think, in general for women because there's a lot of opportunity. I think it didn't maybe come the way we thought it would with legalization. You know, I've met a lot of women through the legacy world thinking that they would transition the brand or their knowledge into the legal space, and that has been a bit of a barrier, which I think we can kind of agree that's been a barrier for Indigenous people, it's been a barrier for people of color, it's been a problem for people with, you know, criminal records, you know, that all those things, you know, we know hasn't maybe gone the way that we thought it would. We know Health Canada is though looking at that. We had a diversity and inclusion forum earlier this year, hosted by Ashley Athill and some other folks, and she's an amazing CEO and person of color of a licensed producer in Ontario. And you know, that has been more opportunities to have those discussions, have that kind of engagement from those minority groups to Health Canada to discuss the issues of the way that things maybe had set up that hasn't allowed that inclusion. And we know that they're looking at that. Like they're looking at gender equality. They're looking at Indigenous groups being at the table with potentially with statutory review. That's a big message that keeps on. We're seeing those kinds of things. You know, the fact that it's still today incredibly challenging to get funding through normal banking systems because of, you know, a variety of reasons. You know, for these people to participate, they need to look at other alternative sources of funding, which is not typically very convenient. So that's a huge part of that group and that work on that diversity group today, which is really exciting that they're starting to look at that and more of an economical sense, what the necessities are of the industry rather than just we put out the regulations without any experience or context of how they are actually applied, and that's what happens when we're a trailblazing country, and you do it for the first time.
Very, very cool. And I mean, you definitely hit it all. R&D being a backdrop to a lot of the industry, and then I've said it on previous episodes without recreating the wheel. So right. So and definitely, I appreciate your answer very much, because this week particularly I've been looking into a lot of the Cannabis Act itself, as well as any available information for the pending Cannabis Act review. And then, of course, the panel announcement. That's anyone's going to be waiting to find out, like, who the panel. Either way. So looking through that, I'm finding very interesting information, and as a brand, looking from digital marketing for brand marketing, and we'll talk a little bit now, like shifting into that as far as Aurora Medical Cannabis or Aurora Cannabis, and either navigating the brand marketing regime itself. So after 4 years looking at legalization, the review is going to kick off. It could be up to 18 months in its entirety. And I'm coming across numbers and statistics looking at, particularly because of the brand marketer, and then looking at trying to navigate the system into feasible markets, sectors, and where everything can make the most sense. For example, when we were talking with Health Canada, I'm looking at numbers as far as education. And so now shifting a bit of the conversation towards that from R&D specifically, with upwards of $46 million allocated over the 5 years since legalization. So in the 4 years towards education, specifically focusing towards that, reducing harmful effects to youth and exposure that way. And then, of course, a couple of other particular topics and areas. But I'm thinking, while I'm absorbing and looking at this and then anticipating to speak with you today, especially, that's kind of what I'm starting to realize. So there's obviously avenues available for education. When it comes to cannabis, though, the image, the discussion, exception to platforms like this, where we are breaking ice and getting the information out there. But the hindrance on brand promotion, for example, or regulatory promotion, when education, I mean, these are the avenues predominantly nowadays when we want to look at educating younger minds. So we have this catch-22 of strict brand regulations, and then a massive allocation of funds to education. So I'm curious to know, Aurora setting precedent as a massive brand in the industry. In your experience in the industry, as well as with Aurora, either which way that you can speak to that, brand marketing, though, and regulations particularly, how has that kind of played out? Is there a particular process? Is it education-based or a platform, an education platform that Aurora rolls out, including staff training or however anything along that line that allows you to get what we're discussing here today out regularly, for example, on the everyday kind of deal?
Yeah, marketing is such a challenging topic in cannabis. You know, the regulations are there; they're broad in language, which really then requires the ownership of the company of whatever decisions they make, whatever they decide to do, the brand marketing they want to follow, how they meet and find. I think the challenge of the industry that I feel involved is the inconsistency in each other, which creates challenges in understanding, right? You know, it's law regulations that different interpretations. You know, you might see something how they are, how, how is that allowed to person that really comes to like challenges for everybody. In terms of brand education, education and especially to the consumers. I think that the challenge that we face though is the amount of quantitative and qualitative information to give people, to give them a lot of really good content so that they feel like confident in their decisions for the information is maybe overused. They're like, well, how do I know if this company's going to kick in half an hour? I don't know. And when you look at new consumers and that sort of thing, that's a really scary aspect when you can't be very concrete about things. And that part of that's challenges with like research and development, challenges with just how everybody makes their own products, and each product can have a different experience depending on who you're using it and what day you're using it on, what you ate that day, and all those things. And that kind of thing is really hard to just easily convey to a consumer in a way that, you know, they can feel confident and educated and, you know, safe in their decisions. I think though, when you think about marketing in the cannabis space, I believe there's a lot more you can do than maybe when you read the reg space value. I think though it's all about what we call creative compliance.
Right.
Finding, you know, language tools, you know, the amount of time I spend with our teams, like just rewording things, just like really small tweaks in the wording, but still trying to get the same message across.
Yes.
You know, and it's really about the details, which some people are a little overwhelmed, or maybe, you know, those are very hard to navigate. And I'd add to, like, while the federal regulations are, you know, I don't want to say restrictive, but broadly language that could imply things. I think where things actually get a lot more challenging is when you get at the country level. And in those retail stores or for retailers and the province having additional restrictions on top of the federal ones and navigating the provinces have certain rules and regulations and can't do things. That's where things get very complicated. Versus on the medical side, we're just federal. We have federal regulations. There's no there's something called surgeons and things, but there's no, you know, wholesale government oversight on that. And there you can, and because that's very targeted marketing, because you're targeting people who are already registered with you, there's a lot more ways to find ways to interact with those patients and clients. You can get to the retail level and all the different retailers and all the different provincial regulations. It's just challenging to try and engage that customer in the way that you want them to hear about what your products are. Because I can only imagine how challenging it would be by the time there's thousands of products coming in, hundreds of new ones every couple months, like, and to be on top of all that education, to be able to educate the customer.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, how do you work, like the universalizing? An area I like to exactly touch upon with that is high school curriculum, for example. And I started the year off in Calgary, Alberta, and I had some opportunities lined up prior to leaving with some insight looking at that, with the potential of the Alberta high school curriculum looking to start to even introduce guest speakers, for example, to that audience less than 19 plus or 18 plus. And to me personally, as a father, I mean, it's one of those things, and I've talked about it previously, where you get caught in wearing the multiple hats, for example. And the same thing applies with the marketing. When you kind of start to want to be unbiased and impartial to it all, it's a never-ending list of product that you can basically get into to try to do that. But definitely with the the young mind and then approaching it, that education component there, that's definitely going to be a huge area. As far as I've even statistically shown that consumption base has maintained, you know what I mean, if not increased somewhat. And it's not to say like go, and obviously like the promotion is the hindrance. So not promoting cannabis use, but promoting cannabis education and then finding the appropriate ways to do that. It just seems that, like you said, the bud tender education, I mean, where do you specialize even, like as far as and that, so I mean, if you, now that you brought it up and we're looking at that, for example, looking at Aurora's take, like, and I mentioned, so good production practice, for example, I've met with some CEOs, I've met with cultivation managers over the last month or so, realistically, from the micro side of it. So now when we're looking at education, the potential for greater education, the hindrance, or however you want to look at it, setbacks or achievements through brand marketing regulations as they stand. But then looking at Aurora, I mean, the capacity at the large scale, the quantitative measures that would be in place. How does that look as good production practice is, you know, when it comes to expansion, not amalgamation, but mergers, acquisitions, and then maintaining that quality assurance through and through, and then representing affordable pricing as well. I mean, and I'm speaking to that as a consumer, you know, and then the consistency in the product that I'm able to source out wherever it is I go. That how like that educate like that, how do we look at that, getting that education out without actually, right? And that, did you get what I'm just going with it though? And it's very tricky.
Yeah. Like, and just, you know, GPP is like the cannabis industry's version of GM, really, right? So it's our rules and regulations on how to produce clean, safe products, oversight by typically quality. And, you know, going through legalization 1.0 and legalization 2.0, at my max, I think I had about 22 licenses I managed across Canada, like site licenses.
Crazy.
And having, I don't think the public or people who didn't have to go through that really understood what it meant to go from a seed to sale, ship direct to the patient for the last 4 years, to in 6 months getting a set of regulations and developing an entire supply chain across Canada with provincial licenses. Like, I don't remember 2018.
Kidding.
Because developing that supply chain and being very involved in that development of getting that supply chain up and running. You know, you went from shipping one jar of weed for one patient to shipping pallets to provinces who have very high expectations, you know, like they're used to giving very experienced industries like alcohol and all that kind of stuff, right? So the GPP on scale is so challenging because, you know, you're constantly, at that time, you're constantly trying to keep up with being able to meet our demands and what we need to produce, but also develop new processes and procedures, and a lot of risk assessment, a lot of risk evaluation. Is this a risk activity? Is it not? Do we understand what this regulation needs from us? Do we need to stop them? Now we got to turn this into an industry in 6 months. You know, and that, and then doing it again the following year. So let's add some food products, let's add some vapes, let's add some concentrates on top of that. And, you know, and that added a whole other level to our regulation. Between 1.0 and 2.0, yeah, we added edibles. I know it's a people see, but in the background, we added additional regulations that we had to follow from different industries, drug we, but we're not a food company, so we can't get certain licenses, so we have to do other things, and so, the last 8 years, we've had what, 5 or 6 sets of regulations for this industry, not on top of all the changes that happened this ad hoc and getting a random email from Canada telling me things have changed. That constant change really, at Aurora, because we've been through all of that, we've sat through inspections. Back then, there was the old days when you get inspections every month. It's much more than every month. Now, but that ability to have that engagement with the regulator being, being able to call on people we've been through a lot together. I want to do this. What do you think? They are really available, which I think is really important to build that relationship with them, to be able to have those candid conversations. But there's also some great industry associations like Super Five and Quality Organization. People and that's where we want to start seeing this standardization. Because there's a lot of variability, there's a lot of interpretation, and so things like I've been down to California with ASTM, the 37 standards. We're looking at the standards. You have the USP looking at developing a cannabis monogram for testing purposes. You have, Standards Canada, very interested in this and being part of all of these conversations. And that's because the regulators want standards developers. Regulators, these standards organizations are actually going to start to develop, rules and standards so everybody follows the same process as we see in other stuff, food or drugs or other things that people consume. And that I think you'll start to see a more consistency. But, for Aurora, having that opportunity to be part of this is, pretty good time already. Plus the added level of international and seeing how other countries are navigating this, how they imported, testing it out, packaging, those give us a few as we, because they're not really, they haven't built specific cannabis regulations in Canada. They're adopting other medication and medicine regulations and applying it. So, not only do we have GPP everywhere, but we actually have GMP everywhere as well to meet our international standards, which are regulated and enforced by the state.
No, yeah, absolutely, for sure. And then hitting on so wow. But so medical, recreational, looking at some of that as far as the response goes there with the anticipated review coming up. It sounds from what the information available, for example, if you look at Manitoba, so Manitoba and Quebec anticipating the Supreme Court of Canada's ruling on the recreational grow limits, looking into that over the week and then finding more information on the anticipated review specifically. And that seems to be somewhat of a designated area of interest for the panel as that rolls out. Definitely medical and recreational boundaries, grow limits that way, as well as even the markets. And then you look at the city of Winnipeg, for example, in Manitoba, looking at when we talk language at the beginning of our discussion and some of that tricky language that exists. So even looking at the Cannabis Act itself, you might find it addressing overall umbrella 18 as a legal age frame. And then whether you come across it or not, but find the appropriate area that identifies depending on the province, according to the provincial regulations and staff. So of course here, Manitoba, the hybrid model that we roll with, and then obviously 19 plus. And then looking at some of the measures Manitoba is taking and going forward with that, and the discussions I've had with cultivators. To me, it's a very hot topic. It's an interesting site as far as even terpenes or anything else that way goes, being on the table. What is far from your insight or passion at this point in the game or moving forward? Do you find that the separation between both or the blend of both? And I mean, are we possibly moving towards, you know what I mean? How does that sit with you as far as Aurora's?
Yeah. So, like, this is all my personal opinion because I was pretty strong opinion about the delineation of I do want to see that even, right? Like, if you take a step back, the Supreme Court says that we have to solve that's fundamental. And Smith did, other times, what did they all do? You can have that with all the types of diseases, right? And having access for medical patients does look different than access. Now, do I think that people probably would go there necessarily providing cannabis to medical patients? 100%. From the data, but I 100% think that because I do. If I can't find it medically, then I might be right? I try and buy all my cannabis medically because I'm $50 and but what I and I'm also an ACMPR grower. I have my own license to grow. You know, so I do grow my own medicine as well. I and you know, personally growing your own is part of the medicine. Growing your own medicine is part of the healing journey. I know. If I'm not healthy myself, because and so you know, medical I think where cannabis becomes very tricky is what makes this product and that definition my mentor for me and the stuff that my philosophy all the different so buying what that product good around all that that could be something at that point when I didn't and that I think that philosophy of medically is very hard to quantify. Like you know, you see that with the CHP on some of the comments from the hospital. The hospital is very educated and using medical professionals, but maybe not a lot of cannabis people. And so they're looking at it as a medicine. You know, the essential function and these techniques that address the good function provide a therapeutic remedy. And that aspect of cannabis is challenging when you think about things like, like that. Why not? Maybe, you know, and even just the act of like inhaling is having a and so the medical method because of there are particularly like all of those things that was the think of the creation of this took over the conversation. Think of that from a mindset because of like how things and visibility. Um, but in my opinion, I really want to if I was to go with, if I was to make a choice for the fact that they would be that I would like to see personally, I would like to see medical. You see higher doses, you see higher percentages, you see higher, you know, you see because these people are seeing good and so they should have access to that. Allow, you know, to get a benefit from doing that. I think that I would love to see that, whether that's for you, I don't know, see it in the States as well. Like in the States, it's like that.
I appreciate your honesty and personal reflection, absolutely, in that response, Annaliese. Actually, just at the end of our episode here, I'm starting to catch a little bit of a fuzzy in the volume there, and it's at the same time though. However, we've reached the end of our episode, so we're at the 36-minute mark. Absolutely fantastic. I'm going to follow up with you, obviously, further to this, and I can't believe how smooth this is actually gone. As far as the discussion, the build-up, the introduction, and identifying some of the, again, it's about the education, and then and really wanting to nail some of that information down.
How did you like that's part of your that is part of your or the challenges with the and you know, there's a lot of barriers that it's really
Very, very nice. Thank you. So I'm hearing a lot of either way, open-mindedness and adaptability, obviously, to navigate to, yeah, I mean, to navigate to the level that you've reached, and then the insight looking ahead, obviously, to want to persevere and then keep pushing through all of that. So again, I appreciate your time here today. I think anyone is obviously going to appreciate the information you've shared and the education you've shared on our episode today. I'm almost speechless. I mean, I've been absorbing the Cannabis Act all week. You've nailed a few things on the head for sure with me. That way I can really kind of get into where I'm at for the rest of this day. And I know you have Thanksgiving plans. It is Thanksgiving Sunday on this fine long weekend. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jordan Fleury. Once again, your host of the Canadian Cannabis Podcast. Thank you for joining Annaliese Kibler and myself today. Annaliese, I'm going to throw out some love to my family and friends, any followers, likers, and subscribers that have stuck and grown with us. We definitely don't plan to go anywhere. We're going to keep plugging through. I mean, so that's where it's at. But yeah, Thanksgiving Sunday, much love and appreciation. If you want to throw out some kudos this way and take us home for the big feast, please do, Annaliese. Share a little bit of share a little bit of your knowledge that way. Thank you.
not be able to buy that. Thank you again. Thank you everybody. Love you. Feel free to follow me on social media. Same company name, you'll find me, and I'll.
Thank you very much.